Welcome to the 2021 Annual Business Meeting, our 109th for the organization, and the second virtual business meeting for us. I'm pleased to call the business meeting to order. The agenda for the meeting is on the screen. Because of our virtual format, we do have to do some things differently. First, we'll use the chat function to identify all of the full members present so that we can confirm a quorum and make this an official meeting. Second, we'll handle new business that will require action by the membership toward the end of the meeting following the breakouts. If members would like to introduce new business, we ask you to bring it to Danielle Dent after the ACSA report and as we move into the breakout discussions. You can use the chat function, or you can speak to Danielle directly when everyone is in the breakout rooms. First, I'd like to introduce the ACSA board members, and if each of the board members would please say hello or here after I read your names so people can see you. First Vice President, Robert Alexander Gonzalez, University of New Mexico.
I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Second Vice President Sharon Haar, University of New Mexico. University of Michigan.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Robert.
Past President Rashida Ng, Temple University.
Hello.
Secretary Treasurer Antje Steinmuller, California College of the Arts.
Hi, everyone.
At-large Director Courtney Crossan, University of Arizona.
Hi, everyone.
At-large Director Anne Bordelot, University of Waterloo.
Hi, everyone.
At-large Director June Williamson, City College of New York.
Hello. Here.
At-large Director Jeffrey L. Day, University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
Hi, everyone.
At-large Director Gundula Proch, University of Washington.
Hi, everyone.
And Public Director Victor Rubin, Policy Link.
Hello, everyone.
Student Director Sarah Takatatsu, American
everyone,
Institute of Architecture Students.
Oh, hi, I'm here.
Executive Director Michael Monti, ACSA.
Hi, everyone.
This is our last opportunity to publicly thank 5 of our board members. So would you please join me in thanking Sarah Takatatsu, Anne Bordelot, June Williamson, Victor Rubin, and Rashida Ng.
Thank you.
Thanks. Now I want to move to introducing our future directors. Thank you to everyone who voted in this year's board elections. I'll now introduce the incoming members of the 2021-2022 ACSA Board of Directors. Our student director, Shannon DeFrance, Roger Williams University. I think Shannon will be joining us a little bit later. Our public director, Martha Campbell of Rocky Mountain Institute. Our at-large public director, Catherine Hamill from the University of Calgary. At-large director, Kwesi Daniels from Tuskegee University. And second vice president, Mo Zell from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Mo will be the 2022-2023 ACSA president. Now I invite Antje Steinmuller, ACSA Secretary Treasurer, to address the membership.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all. It is my role to ensure that we have quorum. If you are a faculty counselor or representing your school in place of your faculty counselor, please identify yourself and the name of your school in the chat. We had about 70 schools pre-registered, and they are shown on screen right now. To have a quorum for business, we need 1/3 or full members of the full member schools represented, which is 49 out of 145 full members. We will continue to monitor the chat to make sure every school who is present is counted in our attendance. I'll come back later to announce quorum.
Thanks, Antia. So now I'll give the president's report, which will be an overview of the past year and looking at some things to come. So far in the 2020-21 year, we've held 3 terrific virtual conferences. Each in its own way has reflected the priorities of our organization, and each has covered a lot of ground. In September, we held the first of a series of collaborative research conferences with the AIA. Carbon was the theme for this year's event, and across 3 days, we held peer-reviewed paper sessions and networking activities that covered carbon management strategies, environmental racism, and how partnerships between schools and firms can produce the kinds of applied research needed to achieve a net zero future. I'm grateful to the co-chairs of this conference, Corey T. Griffin from Penn State University and Erica Cochran-Hameen from Carnegie Mellon University. If you haven't seen the opening keynote with MacArthur Genius Award winner Catherine Coleman Flowers, I encourage you to find it on the ACSA website and to pick up her recent book, Waste: One Woman's Fight Against America's Dirty Secret. This year's Administrators Conference was a wonderful adventure for us. We had planned to be in Seattle, where the University of Washington was ready to host everyone. Instead, we had to extricate ourselves from a hotel contract and find a way to hold our first online Administrators Conference. Be at the table, embrace the future was the theme of the conference, and I would like to thank my conference planning team for organizing a series of highly interactive sessions that involved administrators from a wide range of member schools. Thank you to Renee Chang from the University of Washington, June Williamson from City College of New York, and Beth Lendell-Garber from Boston Architectural College for working with us through a series of twists and turns to a program that I found to be fulfilling because it pushed us to rethink who our partners could be, how we work with them, how important it is to think ahead to what the next generation of graduates can do to advance the discipline of architecture. The third of our 4 conferences scheduled for this year just wrapped up. It too was a journey that involved best laid plans, negotiations with a hotel, and a shifting timeline to plan everything. If the references to the Arch didn't give it away, we were planning to hold the 109th annual meeting in St. Louis with Washington University as our enthusiastic hosts. We'll instead head to St. Louis for the 2022 Administrators Conference, but thanks to folks at Washington University, we still got some great opportunities to see work that exemplified our theme, expanding the view, which was our way into exploring the prospects for transformative architectural education, given our evolving context. The event benefited from an excellent reviews committee, which was responsible for overseeing the peer review process for our research sessions. I'd like to thank these review committee members, Marcella DeSignor from New York Institute of Technology, Tammy Gabber from Laurentian University, Robert Gonzalez from the University of New Mexico, Corey Griffin from Penn State University, Francis Lin from Florida Atlantic University, Mark Mistur from Kent State University, and Kate Wingert-Pladen from Temple University. The other half of the committee we rely on to plan the annual meeting is responsible for the non-peer-reviewed part of the conference. Heather Woofter from Washington University, Shannon Chris from the University of Kansas, and Nicole Wiedemann from the University of Texas at Austin were a visionary and energetic group of collaborators who found ways to make a virtual tour happen and conceived our plan to open the conference with a panel co-sponsored with NOMA, talking about the value of historically Black colleges and universities and what predominantly white institutions can learn from them. I also want to note how fortunate we are to have partners to work with, including NOMA, AIS, and Tau Sigma Delta, which broke new ground this year by awarding its gold medal to architect John Paul Jones, a Native American practitioner whose culturally and socially sustainable efforts have not received nearly the recognition they deserve. We'll publish the plenary panel along with Jones's talk later this spring. It's a nice complement to the closing plenary of the Administrators Conference, which featured a panel of Native and Indigenous practitioners from the US, Canada, and New Zealand. This video is also available on the ACSA website on the 2020 Administrators Conference page. ACSA has one more conference left this year. It's a continuation of our partnership with our counterpart, the European Association of Architectural Education, EAAE. The 2021 Teachers Conference will take place online one more time on June 24 and 25. The conference theme is Curriculum for Climate Agency, Design in Action, and is the result of some in-depth discussions between Pratt Institute, the Oslo School of Architecture, which is our European co-host school, as well as myself and Oya Atele-Frank, the president of EAAE. What I like so much about this conference is its focus on pedagogy. Part of my interest in running for the ACSA presidency has been to advance the quality of pedagogical scholarship in the discipline. You can register for the Teachers Conference on the ACSA website. Discounted registration is open until May 19th, and we plan to announce the schedule and the keynotes in the next week. I'd like to thank Dean Harriet Harris and Professor Jonathan Scalisa from Pratt Institute for proposing to host the conference before the pandemic hit. You'll hear from Robert in a minute that in 2022, we plan to find a way to visit Pratt for a follow-up event. I'd also like to thank Rector Ole Gustafsson and Professor Jürgen Johan Tandberg from the Oslo School of Architecture and Design, as well as Johan de Walsh from the EAAE's Education Academy for working with us on this event. So much of ACSA's work is about scholarly exchange. Over the last year, you've likely seen that we have begun to hold a series of webinars and online discussions. What started in March of 2020 as an attempt to create a supportive network for people pivoting their teaching to an online format has now evolved into sessions that are typically designed to engage ACSA member schools, school faculty and students in discussions of how to make architectural education more inclusive and actively anti-racist. There's much more I can tell you to capture the full sweep of ACSA's activities over the past year, but we're limited by time. You know that ACSA puts on student design competitions, and this year we have the good fortune to continue our partnership with the American Institute of Steel Construction for our steel competition, and with the AIA Committee on the Environment for our COAT Top 10 for student competitions. We also continued the second year of the Course Development Prize, which recognizes innovative courses and curriculum on architecture, climate change, and society. We're grateful to be working with the Columbia University Temple Hoyne Buell Center for the Study of American Architecture on this innovative program. We also have strong partnerships with the major architecture organizations in the United States. We're a sponsor of ACSA's Crit Live, we're sponsor of AIAS's Crit Live program, which brings students into the program for our annual meeting. With NCARB, we launched the Professional Practice Education Library, or PROPEL, which is a digital library of videos for professional practice courses. NAB also continues to be a close partner. They continue to roll out dramatically changed conditions for accreditation, and in response, ACSA has been offering trainings for schools in education assessment with our expert consultant, Herb Childress. Now, I'd like to pause for a minute and turn to talk about our journals. We're at a point of important transition with both of our scholarly journals. Technology, Architecture plus Design turns 5 years old this year. The ACSA board recently did an in-depth review of the journal's first 3 years, working with the TAD editorial board to measure progress against an ambitious mission that they drew for themselves several years ago. They received high marks from the board for hewing close to their mission and for casting a wide net to find editorial board members, reviewers, and advisors to cover a distinct but still broad domain of topics for the journal. The ACSA board is exceedingly proud of the work of the TAD editorial board. You may have seen their call for applications to serve on the editorial board. This is typically a routine process of bringing in new people, but this year we wanted to pause and notice that 3 of the founding members of TAD will end their terms on the journal and make room for more voices to continue the mission of TAD. So on behalf of the ACSA Board of Directors, I'd like to extend our warm thanks and appreciation to Andres Cesarski of New Jersey Institute of Technology, who served as TAD's first executive editor, getting the initial issue of the journal published. Andres, thank you for your hard work. Claire Olson from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo also will leave the journal ready for its new phase. Claire served as an at-large editorial board member and as an issue editor on the Measure issue. Finally, Gina Ripple from the University of Virginia will leave the TAD board, having served from its founding. She was the issue editor for Simulations, TAD's second issue. To all 3, we extend our gratitude for your leadership and service and for helping us to launch a new journal. Next, the Journal of Architectural Education. The Journal of Architectural Education is also at a significant moment. Mark J. Neviu will be stepping down as executive editor of JAE after serving 2 four-year terms in this role. He is the 21st executive editor of JAE. We're confident that Nora Wendell will succeed Mark leading the journal. And the reason for this is because of the extraordinary work that Mark has done, largely quietly, to advance the scope and reach of JAE since 2014. During his tenure, Mark created a number of initiatives to improve the content, the look, and the editorial process that make JAE one of the most respected peer-reviewed journal publications in architecture. He started as executive editor after serving for a brief time on the editorial board, and soon he began to leave an indelible mark. He led a group that redesigned the print issues of the JAE, ushering in an era of color on all the issues pages. He took various task forces and committees through the steps of redesign the JAE online website. Then he began working with the editorial board to analyze the kinds of opportunities for publication that JAE provides to its authors. Mark will be one of the first to tell you that he did not do it alone, which is of course true. He was also able to attract some of the leading scholars, writers, and designers to serve on the editorial board. Design editors such as Amy, Katiana Kulper, and Carolina Dwyer, and reviews editors such as Ivan Rupnik and David Theodore were close colleagues, as were nearly 50 other editorial board members who served during his tenure. Since Mark has been executive editor, JAE has introduced new formats for submission of work, such as micro-narratives and discursive images. Mark faced squarely the challenge of sustaining a high level of rigor for the publication of design work. He also ushered in new processes of developing themes for issues, and during his tenure, we saw the JAE reviews expand into online-only formats, which gave room for more reviews under the JAE imprimatur, as well as more room in the print pages for more authors. And all of this was done effectively, efficiently, and always keeping up good relations with the ACSA staff, whom he understood did more than just publish the JAE. Each year during Mark's tenure as JAE executive editor, the board would conduct an evaluation of his work, surveying editorial board members and staff about Mark's effectiveness as a leader, communicator, editor, and writer. Consistently, we heard from editorial board members that Mark's calm demeanor, willingness to explore new ideas helps make service on the JAE editorial board a privilege rather than a burden of service. At some point during his term came the now oft-repeated phrase that JAE editorial board meetings are like the best faculty meeting you could want to go to. We regret that we can't bring Mark up onto the stage to receive some cheers and a round of applause from the membership. He certainly deserves as much as any person who has given service to ACSA. We have a small token of esteem that we will send him, and really, we should note that Mark has left us with a gift as well. Several years ago, Mark took the initiative to propose creating an edited book on the occasion of JAE's 75th volume year. He convinced two editorial board members, Igor Marjanowicz and Sarah Stevens, to join him as co-editors. And working for more than a year, they read the entire corpus of the JAE and selected a number of essays throughout the years to create the evolving project, the Journal of Architectural Education and the Expansion of Scholarship. It should be a lasting contribution to the literature of our discipline, and it's a wonderful coda to Mark's service on the JAE. Mark, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the ACSA, as well as the staff, we want to sincerely thank you for your excellent work. And finally, to close out my report, I'd like to continue to acknowledge people who are helping ACSA fulfill its mission of leading architectural education and research. About 5 years ago, the organization revised its governance structure with the aim of being more effective as an organization that values continuity and follows through on its commitments. We shrunk the board, clarified roles for board members, and created 3 working committees whose role is to help the board to implement the organization's strategic plan. You may recall that last June, in the aftermath of the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, ACSA recommitted to its strategic priority of making ACSA and architectural education more inclusive and equitable. We had already been working with a consultant to train our leadership on the history of racism and racial injustice in North America, and we were beginning to bring this way of seeing the world to the full ACSA board and staff. We were also going through the first months of the pandemic. We began to see even more acutely the many fracture points inherent in various systems that bind people together. So when we planned our strategic goals for the 2020-21 year, we revisited our strategic plan priorities to focus more intently on outcomes related to racial equity. ACSA committed to more online programming as a resource for members. These webinars and online discussions were intended to help our members assess the curriculum and learning culture in their school and to present venues to share work that demonstrates the power of architecture and design to address injustice and inequity. The result since last summer has been 15 online events with an explicit focus on equity, justice, and race. Additionally, our 3 conferences featured nearly 24 sessions covering similar topics. We're pleased to see so much work happening in the ACSA membership, and we hope to build on that interest through our own work. This renewed commitment was reflected in the charges that we gave to our 3 program committees, and we're now beginning to see many of the outcomes from those committees. We asked our education committee to collect data and create some programming about the power relationships between students and schools with a focus on creating a more equitable learning culture. They're in the middle of this research, and we anticipate a report from them before the end of the year that will lead to resources for our members. You can see the members of this committee, of this year's committee, which is chaired by Alexis Gregory of Mississippi State University. ACSA's leadership committee was charged with deconstructing assumptions about faculty excellence and career advancement in architecture. In particular, we wanted them to create an online event to draft a report about how these assumptions disadvantage some and give advantage to others. Thanks to their work, we're now looking at revising the ACSA AIAS New Faculty Teaching Award. You can again see the members of the committee on screen, including Chair Lauren Matchison from the University of Southern California. Last, we have the Research and Scholarship Committee, which we charged with assessing scholarly work at the intersection of social equity and justice in built environments, or spatial equity as some call it. They've been combing through a decade's worth of publications from ACSA and other sources, and we look forward to their continued work to formulate recommendations for how better to recognize and support scholarly work that doesn't get enough value in the university. Christine Theodopoulos chaired the committee again this year, and you can see the other members of the committee on screen. If we were in person, I'd now ask everyone to take a moment to applaud the work of ACSA's volunteers, both those in the program committees and all the other volunteers who have spoken on ACSA webinars, reviewed papers for our journals and conferences, and served on competition and awards juries. We counted over 800 volunteers helping to advance the mission of ACSA, and on behalf of the board of directors, I want to communicate our gratitude to all of those volunteers. It's been a challenging year for faculty, staff, and students in the ACSA membership. We sincerely believe we've been able to begin to address racial equity in a number of ways. The breakout discussions we're about to have with you, we hope, allow us all to better understand the conditions in all of your programs on these topics. I'd like now to introduce Robert Gonzalez, Dean of the School of Architecture and Planning at the University of New Mexico and ACSA's president-elect, to talk about next year. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about the 3 conferences that we'll be hosting next year. We've got a lot planned, including a slow transition back into face-to-face world. So we can go on to the next slide. We don't have all of the sexy graphics yet for the conferences, but let me begin with the 2021 AIA ACSA Intersections Research Conference, which is titled Communities. This is the second in a series of joint conferences with the AIA using the Intersections brand. The conference will take place entirely online. Conference co-chairs are Georgine Theodore from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and Rico Quirindogo from the City of Seattle Office of Planning and Community Development. The conference theme, Communities, is intended to solicit new ideas, models for practice, and challenges to the architecture profession to address the intersection of climate and community. The conference has 5 tracks, and we encourage you to submit an abstract to one of the tracks: equitable communities, health communities, zero carbon communities, community localism, and post-pandemic communities. Last year's conference attracted nearly 400 participants with ample HSW credits for those needing continuing education. This year promises the same. So the deadline for abstracts is May 19th, 2021, and we'll be sending that out so you can share that with your faculty. The second conference is the 2021 Administrators Conference. We've decided to keep the Administrators Conference all virtual for 1 more year. We also plan to hold it earlier in the semester, so save October 14th and 15th on your calendars. Topics will continue to focus on the many opportunities facing architecture schools, from anti-racist pedagogy to new degree programs, and working with students, faculty, and staff, and external partners. And the last conference, the 110th ACSA annual meeting, will take place in March 2022. And this is when we plan to have our first in-person meeting again. The call for submissions will be published in the next week for both both for submission and peer-reviewed abstracts and for proposals for panel sessions, workshops, and other activities. We're pleased to be working with the University of Southern California as our host school. Dean Milton Curry has agreed to be part of the annual meeting steering committee, along with Dean Monica Ponce de Leon of Princeton University. Empower is the working theme we have for the conference, and we'll be looking at the roles of educators in higher education, not to mention architecture and design in creating a better world. We've also decided that we want to have the best of both worlds in terms of format for the conference. So unless pandemic conditions change, we plan for the annual meeting to be both in person and online. Authors from around the world may submit their work for peer review. If you're accepted, you'll have the choice to present your paper or project in person, or you may opt to present it in a virtual conference, which will take place later in the spring after the in-person meeting has taken place. We expect the peer review process to be the same for all authors, and we think that regardless of whether you present in person or online, it will have the same value to your scholarly record. So please look out for our call for submissions, which will open in the next week and remain open through the spring. Our last conference event planned for 21-22 is a follow-up of this year's Teachers Conference that Lynn mentioned earlier. Pratt Institute came to us with a bold proposal to partner with the Trust for Governors Islands to host the 2021 Teachers Conference. They wanted to use Governors Islands in Brooklyn and New York City as a resource for some exciting on-the-ground experiences related to climate agency. Since we're unable to have an in-person conference this June, we decided to work with them to host an event 1 year later. The working title is Charter Summit for Climate Design Agency, taking its inspiration from the CIAM, the fourth meeting of the Congrès International d'Architecture Moderne. There's more work to be done to develop this program, so please stay tuned, starting with participating in June's virtual teachers conference. And throughout the conference, all of the conferences, we're going to continue to focus on some of the things that I was interested in bringing to the table as I joined the board, and that is our partnerships with community colleges and working to strengthen equity in architectural education with a focus on BIPOC faculty and administrators. So now I'm going to invite Antje Steinmuller to return so she can give the Secretary and Treasurer's report.
Thank you, Robert. Can I get the slides back? Fantastic. Thanks. The ACSA Board of Directors reviews the organization's financial statements at each of our 3 meetings. The board's finance committee also receives more detailed financial information on the organization's budget, investments, and financial management. Each year, the organization has an audit by an independent certified public accountant. For the fiscal year ending August 31st, 2020, the organization received a clean audit with no concerns about the management of ACSA's finances. I would now like to report to you on the state of ACSA's finances. In this slide, you see ACSA's statement of financial position or balance sheet with comparative numbers for last year. You can see that the organization's total assets on August 31st had increased by nearly $385,000. Much of that increase is from deferred revenue, which includes dues received before the new membership year begins, as well as registration fees for the 108th annual meeting that were applied to the 109th annual meeting. The organization's total net assets decreased by $30,033, and I'll explain this more in a moment when we look at the summary of revenue and expenses. I would like to first note that approximately 1 year ago, the organization was able to assess a forgivable loan from the US federal government's Paycheck Protection Program. The loan amount is $158,588 and was used in ways that will allow the organization to have the full amount of the loan be forgiven. This includes underwriting staff salaries and benefits and sustaining the number of people on staff. The funds were also used to cover rent that we paid to the American Institute of Architects for our office space in DC. From an accounting perspective, the loan helped ACSA sustain its cash flow. However, it shows on our balance sheet as a liability. Once the loan is forgiven, the amount will improve our total net assets. This will likely occur during the current 2020-2021 fiscal year, which ends August 31st, 2021. Now we turn to the fiscal year 1920 summary of revenue and expenses. The organization showed a total net loss for the year of $30,033. However, investment income and growth in the value of our investments helped to cushion what was really a $220,119 operating deficit. This is shown on the right side of the slide. The operating loss was primarily due to a reduction in conference revenue and in advertisement revenue. As the previous Secretary-Treasurer, Nicole Wideman, reported to you at last year's annual business meeting, the Board of Directors took several steps at the onset of the pandemic to protect the organization's finances and to prevent a greater net loss. This includes cutting travel, consultants, and other discretionary expenses for the remainder of the fiscal year, as well as securing the PPP loan, which is not reflected in the organization's operating deficit and only on the balance sheet. As you can see in this slide, our conference registrations were down 45% over the previous year, and our publications revenue was more than 25% lower. This is primarily website advertising revenue. It is also worth noting that our sponsorship revenue was down significantly at over 50%. However, this drop was anticipated before the year began, as some of ACSA's sponsored programs ended after the 2018-2019 fiscal year. As the chart indicates, the organization's supporting services or overhead and office expenses are about 22% of our budget, a good ratio according to our auditor. NAB and accreditation-related expenses are the second largest area of expenses, with ACSA passing through just over $408,000 of U.S. full and candidate member dues to NAB during the academic year or fiscal year, sorry. Looking ahead now to the current fiscal year and beyond, the organization is carefully monitoring our operating budget. The switch from in-person to virtual conferences has reduced our conference revenue, but it has also reduced our expenses. Michael Monti is in contact with the Finance Committee and the Executive Committee regularly on the organization's current and prospective budget. We're also fortunate to access a second forgivable Paycheck Protection loan of approximately $163,000. These funds will be put to the same use, and we expect the full amount to be forgiven by the federal government. Like our member schools, ACSA sees some uncertainty in the next few years. We are concerned about drops in student enrollment and dwindling support for faculty development, but we are also seeing new opportunities for partnerships and for revenue that have come about in our socially distant situation. Finally, I want to inform the members that we are taking new steps to tie our financial planning with our strategic planning. This means looking carefully at different multi-year budget scenarios, which Michael Monti updates throughout the year as conditions change. We're looking both at ways to manage unanticipated drops in revenues, and we are looking at ways to make strategic investments from our reserves to meet the strategic priorities that the Board of Directors identifies, such as continuing to fulfill our commitment to making ACSA and architectural education more equitable and inclusive. I'm available to answer any more questions about the budget in the chat or after the breakout sessions at the end of the evening. So at this point, I can confirm also that we have met quorum. And I'll hand it back to Lynn.
Thank you, Antia. I am going to give Mike Monty the floor for just a minute, because apparently there was an error in our slides with respect to the TAD board. So Mike.
Hi, everyone. It's not just an error in the slides, it's an error in the script, which I provided to Lynn, and this is my fault, and I want to apologize. Andre Zarzicki is not leaving the TAD board quite yet, so Andre, don't think that we're publicly moving you out. Instead, Karen Browse, who is the original design editor for the TAD journal, helped us get the design template and get the first several issues of TAD looking really crisp and clean. Is going to be leaving the board. She also served as an issue editor for the translation issue. So I think Karen's here. And I want to recognize and apologize to Karen for getting that wrong. And of course to Andre, who we have the benefit of having on the board for another year. Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for pointing that out. So now we're going to, we want to hear from all of you. And we have set up some breakout discussions. We'll have ACSA board members ready to facilitate discussions in the breakout rooms. We have 4 topics ready to go, but you may also have your own questions to ask as well. Board members are being asked to take notes so that we can debrief on what we're hearing tonight. Before I review the topics, let me also let you know that it's time to raise any new business that may require action by the membership, as I mentioned at the start. If you have new business items, please remain in the main room. Don't go to the breakout room, so that you can communicate whatever your item is to Danielle Dent, the ACSA Director of Membership, who's producing tonight's event. If any new business items come up during your breakout discussions, you have until 7:40 to bring them to us by doing the same thing. Leave your breakout room and talk or chat with Danielle. If any new business items come up, we'll end the breakout discussions at 7:45 Eastern time and reconvene in the main room. If there's no new business items raised, we'll broadcast a message into the breakout rooms that the conversations can continue until 8 p.m. Eastern time. The topics that are on the topics for our discussions, or the questions for our discussions, are on the screen, and we'll paste them into the Zoom chat window. They address a range of topics that we're interested in hearing from you all about. How are the students at your school responding to current national socio-political concerns such as racial equity, voting rights, trans rights, or other locally prominent topics in your region or your state? What are the most interesting conversations that you're having at your institution right now? What new programs are emerging at your institution? For example, degree programs, educational programs, curricular or co-curricular efforts. And is your institution making any moves to address climate change? If so, what areas are they included? Things like travel or support for travel, concern about the institution's carbon footprint, addressing things like energy consumption, renewable energy, reuse of buildings versus building new buildings, support for faculty research that focuses on climate change or environmental resilience, or support for new courses or course content, or student organizations that are addressing climate change.